at C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Park, Basseterre, St. Kitts. Builders Paradise is there to help you to be prepared. Builders Paradise, where your island dreams begin.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Talk That Get Results. I'm Everett Weber Herbert, and as per usual, we are here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category and you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line, address it to a Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis. Or give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. With regard to the participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You got a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that when you're getting on the show, you're well organized and that you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem not within our broadcast standards. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Talk That Get Results. Tonight, the heavyweights are in. Dr. Patricia Bartlett, good evening.
Good evening, Rebel. Good evening to the entire listening and viewing audiences, and with special good evening to my favorite niece in St. Kitts, Merle, my cousin Cynric, and Pam, and Mr. Martin there in St. Thomas, my husband, good morning. And to, I think there was somebody else I was supposed to say hello to, and I'm not getting the name right now, and forgive me, people, but I'm getting old. Anyway, Bebo, thanks for the invitation to join you tonight. I know I have not been here for the last 2 weeks, and I know it's not my fault, it's Marcellus' fault. I understand. I thought he was just discriminating against me when they were talking about money 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I sat home and I was like, well, I can talk about money too, and I didn't realize he was trying to reach me, but we worked out the communication, and so I'm back tonight, and thanks again for the invitation.
Ted Hobson, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and good evening to my fellow panelists. And I really would like to say, Webo, happy independence to all our people, to the other panelists, and all our divisions and petitions, wherever they may be, throughout the world. Webo, as usual, it's always an honor to be on this program, and I enjoy being here, and every opportunity that I could, and I will try and be here. So I hope that we'll have a good discussion tonight, and that we could move into tomorrow, and all of us enjoy our Independence Day.
The Honorable Spencer Brand, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and good evening to my colleagues on the table. Let me say a very special good evening to all Kittitians and Nevisians, wherever they may be, here in the Federation and further afield. Let me offer to them a happy 35th anniversary of independence. Still a young nation, but I think that we have much to be thankful for. I believe that as a young nation, we have done reasonably well over the last 35 years. So I want to say to all Kittitians and Nevisians and all residents who are living here within the physical space of St. Kitts and Nevis, happy independence to all. Let me say, Webo, to all those who are feeling a bit down tonight for one reason or the other, you know, going through a rough patch, a difficult patch, the loss of a loved one, you know, some mishap, some tragedy. I hope that they can pick themselves up despite the mood or the circumstance. Move on. Let me say, Webo, that despite at times difficult times, you know, we can still look to the future with some semblance of hope. Good evening, Webo, and thanks once again for the invitation. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here once again.
Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts and more particularly the gracious people of Nevis, those who will be listening and viewing us throughout on Facebook and on YouTube. Again, I must say happy independence to all, and we must begin to celebrate this 35th anniversary. We have emerged, of course, from a small country, St. Kitts Nevis. 1623, of course, the settlement of St. Kitts, and 1628, settlement of Nevis. If I can remember my history, Sir Thomas Warner, 1623, St. Kitts, and maybe Anthony Hilton, Nevis in 1628. And hence, we have traveled this journey, and we have accomplished an enormous amount with reference to where we are today. And we're going to celebrate our independence tomorrow, which tells me there is some degree of interdependence with reference to nations. And as we are a country now, although we are in our adolescent stage, we can still boast that we are carrying a certain amount of leverage weight, and as one of our prominent leaders would say, we are punching above our weight. And the number of people who have, in fact, reached to high levels with reference to education and leadership, not only in St. Kitts and Nevis, but throughout the globe. Because I know that our lady who has just been promoted to our Deputy Governor General for Nevis, her daughter operated in Singapore, a Nevisian, and he tells you exactly that without her being educated properly, a foundation that she got from Nevis, she would not have arrived at that level, operating for Microsoft in Singapore. And of course, we have quite a number of other people who are operating at a global level. And it tells you that Nevis and St. Kitts have been able to produce quite a number of stalwarts, high-level people with reference to education and leadership. And therefore, we must celebrate our interdependence, but more importantly, our independence tomorrow. 35 years, even though it is a short time in the history of nations, we know that we are a part of the world's nations, and as a result, Nevis and St. Kitts, now on that corridor, now on that go around with reference to where we are in the world. Nevis, of course, has done very well. And thus, we have arrived at this particular juncture of maturity, politically, I mean. Webo.
Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand, Ted Hobson, and Dr. Patricia Bartlett. That's the panel. This is Thought That Get Results. We'll be back after these.
From Queen City, Nevis, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, Vaughn Radio.
Island Roofing and Hardware Limited, located next to the Monduk Track on Long Point Road, Nevis, specializes in the manufacture of 24-gauge pre-painted Galvalume roof sheets and the sale of tropical green hat lumber. They offer the traditional corrugated roof design for residential buildings along with the U-panel design for commercial buildings. Their roof sheets measure 42 inches in width and are manufactured on site and can be cut to whatever length you desire, thus eliminating the need for joining your roof sheets. Their aluminum base roofing sheets, which are available at an affordable price of only $14 per foot, are of the highest quality. Their opening hours are Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. For more information, call 664-2441 or 664-2959. Island Roofing and Hardware Limited, meeting your complete roofing needs by providing quality products at affordable prices.
back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with Dr. Patricia Bartlett, Ted Hobson, Edric W. Stanley, and the Honorable Spencer Brand. Now, I detect that some or all on the panel perhaps want to expound a bit on the independence of St. Kitts and Nevis. I have that listed on my in my docket as well. But I wanted to continue with the discussion that we had, with the topic that we had last week with the debtors' prison, because that's the buzz. And Edric, I got to tell you, there is a gentleman, I wouldn't call his name, but in a discussion with him today, he told me that's about the only thing I've ever agreed with Edric Stanley on. Right? So I...
Hurrah!
Right. And it has been a hot debate back and forth. And I'm detecting, in my view, it seems as if the persons who are in favor of the law staying may be able to fit under one category, and those who seemingly think that it should go fits maybe under another heading. So it's a fierce debate, and so I think that perhaps we can look at it a little more. The question that I have been asking, though, and nobody seems to answer, so I'm going to put it first of all to Ted, and then maybe to Brand, because it's just my own view that these two might be in the best position to help. Ted, do you know when they're thinking about doing away with the prison aspect of that law, what are they going to replace it by? I'm asking, a lot of folks are asking.
Well, I don't think they have decided what they will be coming up with to replace this, what they call debtors' jail or debtors' prison. I believe that this matter came up because there was an act of Parliament being passed on dealing with credit reporting, which was trying to set up a credit system that would, assist the banks in finding out whether applicants for loans have other debts elsewhere. In the United States of America, of course, this is well documented. This is a system, a well-established system, that you are known by your credit worthiness. Every person almost in the United States has been categorized as whether he has a good credit rating or bad credit rating or whatever. And you can't move from one bank to the other bank because all the banks would be aware of your credit worthiness. And that legislation was meant to assist the banks in Nevis and St. Kitts. But the Honorable Mark Brantley, in a really well put together speech supporting the legislation, also referred to the fact that the lenders need to be pulled in, as it were, and they shouldn't escape responsibility, because many of them are predatory lenders, meaning that they encourage people to borrow loan when they're new, or they ought to know that these people will not be able to repay. And so not all the blame should be put on the borrowers. And the Prime Minister, in his response, thanked the Honorable Mark Brantley for his speech and that aspect of it, where he accepted and also agreed that the lenders have been very irresponsible in lending out money. And so he decided, I think almost off the cuff, that something has to be done. And of course, there are countries in the Caribbean and in the United States of America as well that you don't send people to prison because they have a debt. But maybe they have some system that replace the one we have here. But Webo, I think there's a misunderstanding about the system. If you borrow money from the bank or from credit union or from an individual and you don't pay, and that person take you to court, the court will, as it were, accept that if you have no defense, the court will say yes. You are convicted, not convicted, but you are liable to pay the money back to the person. And the court doesn't set a time limit. So you have to come back to the court if that person doesn't pay, in what is known as a judgment debtor summons. And that process really, Webo, is to investigate whether that person has the means to pay. No magistrate or judge could send a debtor to prison unless there is this investigation and hearing before the magistrate that that person is in a position to pay. It is in the nature of contempt of court that you go to prison. Not because you owe the money. It's because the court has made a decision in a JDS or judgment debtor summons process that you have money to pay and you're refusing to pay. The problem is, Webo, is that when somebody is found to be liable to another person for debt owed by the court, the tendency is that when there is this judgment debtor summons and this hearing takes place, they don't turn up. They don't turn up to court because they figure they owe the money and they don't turn up, by and large. And what would happen is that the lender will go before the magistrate, mostly the magistrate, and says, look, I know this man can pay. He works at Hosford's and he works for $3,000 or $4,000 a month. And he can pay. The trouble is that the defendant who owes the money is not there to defend himself. So the magistrate has to accept the evidence of the lender, whether it's true or false. And so when the court makes this decision, the court will say you have to pay such and such amount of money in 2 months. If the 2 months come and the person doesn't pay, then that person goes back to the court and say, Your Honor, you made an order on such and such a time, and the person should pay me by such and such a time. He hasn't paid. And the court will then make an order that the person should go to prison for no more than about 6 weeks, because it's really a contempt thing that you disobey the order of the court. You are not sent to prison for 2 years or any time. It's just for a nominal amount of time, generally 6 weeks, to, in a sense, encourage you to pay the money. But you still owe the money. That's the problem. Because it's not, because you go to prison, like it's not like a criminal matter where you serve your sentence and you're done. You still owe the money. So you could be sent back to prison each time that you are brought back for the same amount of money. The real issue really that people have to understand is that the magistrate cannot send anybody to prison, or the judge cannot send anybody to prison unless he or she, judge or judge or magistrate has evidence before him that the person can pay.
That is what you explained.
And refusing to pay.
And what you have just explained, Mr. Hobson, it is the law as it is now.
As it is now.
Okay. So if, and I understand it clearly. Now, what is the rationale for the changing it? Because the way I'm getting it is that they're changing it so that they do not send people to prison because they owe. But what you explain, that is not what the law is saying.
No, that's not what the law is.
Right. So you
There's
think
a misunderstanding high up too.
But that's
You know, I mean, as I said, the decision I made, you know, it sounds terrible that people owe money and they because they can't pay, they're sent to prison. That's not so. You have to be brought before a court. The court has to listen and to see whether you are in a position to pay and you're refusing to pay.
Because I think that it is so important, in my view, when people explain and people understand how something works. Because if you now, when you now go and change that, what are you fixing? Because people will still owe, and they will still have to pay, minus the ability to send persons to prison. However, if you take that out, and this is part of the discussion, do you think people will be more encouraged to owe and do not pay? Because
of course, I mean it goes. I mean, it's automatic. If they figure they're not going to prison, they will borrow. I don't know what the government has in store in this upcoming legislation to get over that problem and get over that hurdle. Because what is going to happen is that the lender is going to be very, very careful now. So to that extent, it would be helpful because a lot of them are predatory lenders. You know, they know people can't pay, and the different hire purchase companies around here that you only have to pay down $1 or $2, whatever it is, small amounts of money, and walk out with a bed or something like that. Well, now it's going to be more difficult because they know that the sanction of imprisonment down the road is not there anymore.
But on the flip side of that, though, what if one argues that the persons who are at a lower economic scale, they can't get credit, and it hinders their progress somewhat?
Well, that's the problem, Webber. That I see down the road, because now the lenders and the credit and the hire purchase people are going to be more careful. And they ought to have been more careful before, but they're going to be even more careful in lending their money and not taking the slightest risk.
Mr. Brand?
Well, this particular situation is a very delicate process because Mr. Hobson spoke about the responsibility of the lenders, and I believe about that the qualification, so to speak, of persons who are seeking financing for various reasons. There is really no mechanism, so to speak, in place to get the best picture of their creditworthiness. And oftentimes, Webber, I believe that some persons are offered financing, or financing have been forced on them against the backdrop that quite a number, or quite often, that the persons are right within that threshold of uncertainty as it regards to their repayment. And the creditworthiness mechanism is something that I believe would help to alleviate some persons from being able to have access to financing. Now, that in itself creates another problem, because it would mean that some persons who are seeking to better themselves, some persons who are seeking to do certain things to improve their own conditions are oftentimes and would be deprived of certain levels of financing. So it is a very delicate situation, Webo. I believe that one of the ways in which we can try and alleviate some of these difficulty, and I've said it I think just a few days ago, is that one of the areas that we need to probably take a closer look at, in my mind, my personal view, is the minimum wage. And I think, Webo, that could be an area where the financial situation of quite a number of persons can be significantly improved. I think oftentimes that most of the persons who are really desperately seeking financing to upgrade themselves or improve themselves, they fall within a bracket where their salary just really and truly cannot meet their necessary expenditures. So one of the areas that I personally feel that we need to look at very seriously is this matter of minimum wage. I know a lot of people is not going to like to hear me say that, but that is an area that I feel that can be looked at to improve, Webo, the situation of many of our persons in our community. Mr. Hobson explained the process of, when a person default and ended up in prison and so on. And I too believe that there is this misconception that persons go to prison because they owe or they don't pay. It is a process that normally goes through the court. And I think that looking at some of the cases, persons end up in court because of, in my mind, just being disrespectful to the whole process. And I think that magistrates and judges normally have a short fuse for anyone, regardless of the circumstances, to try and disrespect the process. Mr. Hobson spoke about people not showing up for cases. And that is a real situation where persons, some of the businesses, I know if you pass in front of the magistrate court on a Tuesday, you normally will see quite a number of businesses there, and the first thing that goes off in my mind is that it appears as though that there might be quite a number of persons who are not living up to their commitment. But it's a very delicate situation, Webo, and like I said, from where I sit, from my own personal view on it, that I think that there need to be a broader look, a broader view when it comes to the minimum wage.
I'm going to go to a break, and I detect that Mr. Stanley, who is a commensurate businessman, would like to attack you, or not attack you, but engage you on that topic of the minimum wage, as to find out whether or not the minimum wage is not tied to anything or tied to certain things. But I have to get this break. When we come back, we'll come back with Mr. Stanley. This is Thought That Get Results with the Honorable Spencer Brand, Edric W. Stanley, Ted Hobson, Dr. Patricia Bartlett. We'll be back after these.
When VON vibrates, the whole Caribbean must shake.
860 AM, the Powerhouse.
Looking for a place you can go to and relax and enjoy a healthy meal? Check out Island Life Vegetarian Food and Juice Bar located at Pinny's Industrial Site below the supply office. They are open Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. They offer you healthy, delicious, nutritious food on a menu that boasts Ital food, sandwiches, burgers, roti, puddings, and much more. They have a wide variety of freshly squeezed fruit and vegetable juices and smoothies that includes beet, carrot, pumpkin, tamarind, star apple, and sarsaparilla, and much more. Contact them today at 660-5318 or 668-3107.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results. Edric.
The ruined spendthrift is no longer proud. Claim kindred there and had his claims allowed. It's not how much a man makes, it's how much he saves. And if you're indisciplined, no matter how much you're paid, it can be triple the minimum wage, you will wind up the same way if you're indisciplined. From childhood to teenage years to employment. One acquires no debt from childhood and lets it through to the teenage years. But as they become part of the economic system, they earn and they have to know, discipline themselves as to what they're going to do with the earnings. In my past employment, I have done analyses for people monetarily over and over and over to show them at age 25, you get your first job, your target in terms of age is 65. You have 40 years. And within that 40 years, if you were to pay them a salary of, say, $20,000 per year, 20 by 40, that's $800,000. And therefore, if you check them at age 65 and ask them how much out of that $800,000 they've got, many, 97%, wouldn't have 10% of that $800,000. But the other 3%, who were thrifty, wise, and smart, would have accumulated simply because they have employed a system of discipline from the word go. And we look around us, and you'll see all those who have not been very thrifty and became like the ruined spendthrift. So if Mr. Brand decides to increase the minimum wage, the fellow who decides that Friday afternoon it's time to party and he squanders all, Monday morning he doesn't have a dime in his pocket, simply because he's a ruined spendthrift. But one who sees things differently and disciplines himself or herself, as the case might be, would recognize that ultimately, when they become older in their less productive years, that thrifty system that they have brought upon themselves would pay off. The majority of people in our community don't save. And I suspect that the explanation Ted gave in terms of contempt of court, it is just the court's way of saying we made the rules, but truly is for that debtor to pay his debt. And if you don't pay your debt, you're going to be thrown in jail. The contempt of court is the legal application of the judge or the magistrate to adjudicate. But the objective, the main objective, is to get you to pay your debt. How did you incur that debt? I could give you the story.
Okay, let me go to Brand to see whether or not Brand wants to respond on you in terms of his view of solving some of these problems by raising the minimum wage. Mr. Brand?
Well, while I agree with Mr. Stanley when it comes to the individual who is reckless in the utilization of his income, if someone decides to sit on the sidewalk on a Friday afternoon and drink off his weekly wages, and Monday morning comes and he don't have any money in his pocket, that's a different case. That is someone who is being foolish and reckless. I am talking, Webo, about persons who are working 8 to 4, almost 7 days a week, and at the end of the week, their income cannot sustain their livelihood.
But Mr. Stanley, though, put a percentile to it. Mr. Stanley is suggesting the majority of the persons, remember we're speaking about a sort of bracket of persons who end up not being able to pay their debt. And you're proffering...
I am not even talking about reaching to the stage of debt as yet. I am talking about persons who have a job, who are trying to make ends meet, and their wages are just not able to keep up to pace.
But making ends meet, though, Mr. Brand, is relative. Because what does the ends comprise of? For instance, Mr. Stanley says, in some instances, the ends can comprise of going by the bar on a Friday afternoon. And the ends also can comprise of, right? Maybe going and doing a purchase which you should not do at that time.
Yeah, I'm following you, but let's look at if you want to food, clothing, shelter, electricity, water. I'm not even adding. Well, you add in cable, but cable is cable.
Every person has cable.
School stuff. Yes, you say maybe it might be relative, but when you look at the context of whether or not there are some persons...
Food, clothing, shelter, right?
Yeah.
But we have different grades of shelter. You'll agree with that?
Yes, we will.
Government provide that for free.
Well, let's get in Dr. Badley.
Shelter?
Yep.
Government provides shelter for free?
Yep.
Not this government.
I'm not aware that government provides shelter for free.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Badley.
Well, Webo, I just wanted to make some general comments as it relates to the position that we're in now. And I think what the law is seeking to do now is to kind of roll back and kind of try and get us back on scale, because I think that we cannot, and most economists would tell you that we cannot continue the way that we're going. On an individual basis, most of us are overextended. We are over-indebted. At a country level, the same thing. If you look around, most of the things, these things are not just happening in isolation, Pressure is what is being brought to bear here for us to kind of regularize the way we do business here, because we have been doing business a kind of way here that a lot of people, more people probably might have ended up in debtor's jail had some other people had the courage to take them to court. What we see here, we have the debtors, the law related to the debtors prison. We have the law that is now related to the credit bureau or establishing such an entity. And of course we have other, even in the private realm now, even in accounting, they have this thing that has been forced on us, this new way of accounting now, which is the IFRS 9, I think, where if you lend somebody something in your credit, in your balance sheet now, you have to start making provisions, and I think most of the banks are experiencing that now. You have to set aside something to cover for those bad debts. you know, but in order, you'll have to anticipate who, you know, the riskier, people. And I think in line with that, you have all this credit bureau, legislation that is going to come on stream soon. That is going to teach us a little bit of principle. We need to start as a people, start to live within our means. And I know that the Premier has been saying that, and people get upset with him just because he's telling them to live within the means. But we have to, be cognizant of the fact that, there's no free money anymore. The days of putting up a house, as guaranteed, banks are not allowed to keep property. Banks are not in the business of, so you have to start securing loans differently. People are doing business differently now. I'm driving around now. When I was small, I used to hear about fault on people's houses, and I never seen any such a thing. But now I'm seeing that because of the new way of accounting. So we're going to have to accept that it is a new way of accounting. Mr. Brand made the proposal of making a case for an increase in the minimum wage. I agree that probably that is something that we ought to look at. But that does not excuse it, because a lot of people in that category not necessarily ones who are lining up to go into debtors' jail. The point was made earlier that the lenders ought to bear some responsibility for lending to people who can ill afford to pay back. So when we get to that stage, I know a lot of external forces, or not that I know, but I suspect that a lot of external forces are being brought to bear on the way we do business in the Federation. And if we're going to, keep our banks fluid and we're going to make sure that, things progress, and we cannot, it is not sustainable for us to be carrying so much debt. Not on an individual basis, not at a country level, not at a regional level. And I think that we may be listening a little more attentively now to the governor of the central bank. I would imagine that he's putting a little pressure on us, because right now we have National Bank, which has a lot of lands, and you have to be able to get your money back. But I don't know at National Bank, based on the money that would have lent us at the federal level, if they would ever be able to recoup that kind of money, and that puts a lot of stress on the banks. So when you hear issues about de-risking and all these kind of things, a lot of what we would have done locally would have contributed to the state that we're in now. And people just going to have to live within their means. Mr. Hobson explained how you get to that point. I don't think that you should be sending people to jail because they can't afford to pay, personally, because when they go to jail, I don't understand how they get, to pay you. If it is that you're holding assets or, against whatever it is that they would have borrowed, try and see if you can get that disposal. But it's not easy to sell, a whole house. A lot of people put up houses, and I'm like, if I were on the board and people lend to certain places, and not that I want to discriminate against people, but it's difficult sometimes to get a house sold in some of these areas. Even if you have $1 million house in a $50 neighborhood, how you go get it sold? People who can afford to buy a house for $1 million not going to go into those neighborhoods to live. So it is a dilemma that I think that we face, and I think we're taking corrective measures now, albeit a little late, but let's say better late than never. And we need to start doing business, differently. But debtors' jail, I don't think is going to solve anything. It's going to scare people away, I think, from getting involved, legitimately getting involved in entrepreneurship. But that is, I guess, would be a different story for a different evening.
Mr. Hobson, let me ask you this: over the years, this law has been in place. Has it been effective when people were sent to jail or to prison? What kind of effect it has? Let me take this first, and then come back to you for the answer. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. Relating to this debtors' jail, I think Parliament did not have sufficient information upon which to base the decision to abolish it. Now, when a committal warrant is issued, there is a number given to it. So, for instance, it would say number JDS number 200 of 2018, which would mean that there were 200 committal warrants issued for the year 2018. Now, I believe that statistics would have helped. the question should be put to the magistrate court as to how many committal warrants were issued in a particular year. How many of those warrants yielded the result of people paying up and preventing themselves from going to jail, and how many of those who actually went to jail. And I think the statistics surrounding that area would help the legislature to determine how effective the debtor going to jail would be. Now, when you look at the JDS that Mr. Hobson referred to, the wording of the JDS is this, that the particular judgment debtor had the means to pay, but either refused or neglected to pay. So they don't really send people to jail unless that happens. And if you're earning, you had the means to pay, however little. So if you do not pay, you either had the means to pay and willfully and deliberately refused to pay, or you were negligent in whether you wanted to pay or not. So I think the legislature did not have sufficient information. Now, I can't comment on the bill because I have not yet had my copy of the Gazette in which the bill would be published. So my comments would be as I've just outlined. Now, I would support Mr. Stanley. People who have little income must not go and increase their indebtedness by borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. They must use discipline. And I support Mr. Stanley on that point. And this is my contribution for tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. That in essence what I was seeking, to ask Mr. Hobson, but Mr. Hobson, you can still add to it.
As you would imagine, the caller is also a legally trained person, so he was able to, and he's doing much more practice at the magistrate court at level at this time than I have, and to my estimation is, Webo, that very few people are sent to prison, because once the bailiff comes to them, somehow or the other they find the money. I myself have been at the end where somebody comes to me and says, the bailiff has come to my door, and I don't want to go to prison, and I have myself put my hand in my pocket to help them out. And you would be surprised some of the people that, find themselves in that position. So people really are afraid of going to prison. And it really is a means of really forcing them to pay. But a limited amount of persons do go to prison. And as I said, it's only for a short period of time. The unfortunate thing is, Webo, of course, is that you still owe the money. And you could be taken back time and time again for the same amount of money. But I want to say more than that. I think one of the problems we have in this country, and I suppose in the Caribbean, is that this quality of life has changed enormously, and it is having an effect on our young people and crime and all of that, because nowadays, and I ponder it, Webo, I think about it all the time, because most of these young women who unfortunately didn't do well in school end up starting to be out there in the world and so forth. And they leave home. They may be working in one of the several restaurants we have on the island for the kind of money that Honorable Spencer Brand frown on, small wages, And they leave home, sometimes with a child, and they can't pay the rent. They have to pay rent. They have to pay electricity. Because of the quality of life in the country, they want to have television and cell phone and all the amenities which become normal these days for every individual. And they are in serious financial difficulties because they cannot maintain that quality, that kind of life that they want to live. They've left home, so they're not covered by their parents and so forth, shelter and all that, and food and all that sort of thing. And it's causing a havoc in the country because these young kids are not able to look after themselves or indeed the children they're producing. And so they're moving from one partner to another partner, and then they're having children all the time. And each time they have to find some means to supplement their wages, which is causing a breakdown in the quality of life, the standard of behavior, and all that sort of thing. So it's a really worrying situation. It's not a simple discussion, but it goes very deep. This business of how we are managing, how young people are managing their lives in the kind of affluent society in which we live. Because what used to be considered a luxury is no longer a luxury. You have to have electricity in your house. You can't have lamp anymore.
Why?
Because that doesn't exist anymore. The quality of life is such that you can't have lamp. You have to have gas. You have to pay for gas. You can't have coal. And these are normal things, Webo. And the young ladies who are on their own, and a substantial amount of them are now leaving home and not their parents, have to find all these means to maintain themselves, and they don't have it. And so they borrow money from here and they borrow money from there, and they can't pay.
But they're not the ones most, at least I don't know what the statistics say, you know, and it is always good to have data to inform the decisions that we make. And I think the caller made a good point as it relates to that. Too many times we have policies that are being made that, you know, don't really, they're not grounded on good, you know, data. And you need that. And I think there's someone at the UN who had made a suggestion that the data is what is the lifeblood of decision making. And if you do not have data, you end up making sometimes some regrettable decisions and policies. Because Mr. Hobson, you're talking about these young ladies who leave home and paying rent. Most of them are not paying no rent. It was about coming out to mortgage because, you know, politicians have said, you know, shake your key, you know, and they encourage a lot of course, a lot of single mothers, you know, were given houses and they can't afford to pay for them. And this is data should have informed that kind of decision. And I even heard an ad that used to be played right on this radio station that would have said, you know, there was this girl talking to a friend, you're like, oh, you mean, you know, time's hard, come out to your mother's house, you know, time's hard. And that is a government-sponsored ad suggesting that you can't afford time's hard, but you must still come out and get a house, you know, still cut to land and houses and get a housing and get a house. So we have promoted this kind of thing at the highest level, you know, encouraging people to live above their means, and we have even accommodated them. Because a lot of those people who are in some of the houses that are called affordable houses cannot afford those houses, but they've been accommodated to get them. And then after that, what happens? You know, it gets compounded.
Okay.
And so the matter of indebtedness gets impounded.
Okay, Dr. Bartlett, let me take this. I'll come back to you. Thank you for holding. Could you go ahead?
Good evening. The explanation of the existing law given tonight was really instructive because I'm sure that a lot of persons like myself felt, as the Prime Minister put it, that we were criminalizing poverty, and we felt that that would have been really unfair. Okay? But this is not really criminalizing poverty. I mean, criminalizing poverty to me is sending someone to jail for stealing a tin of sardines because he didn't have money to buy it. As you described it, this is more like incentivizing responsibility, right, to really speak euphemistically. And while the proposed legislation may be popular with debtors, it certainly will not be popular with creditors. And because there are usually more debtors than creditors, I worry that once this hits the realm of politics, the politicians will be tempted to play the numbers game and side with the debtors, right? We need to be very careful with this. For prison is definitely a deterrent for most people. And I also worry about the loss of a stimulating effect on the economy when both consumer spending and lending is decreased. Okay, those are my points.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Bartlett?
Yes, I was just suggesting that, sometimes the policies really, kind of contributed to exacerbating sometimes the situation that poor people find themselves in. I still don't agree that I think you should find alternative means to recover monies. I don't know, like I said, putting up an old house would really help, but it is good that people be able to know who you're lending to, your risk level. And banks ought to know that, if you owe John and you owe James, the banks ought to have that as, full disclosure. People, and it would at least force us, before it happens, before we get into debt that we can't pay, force us to start living responsibly.
And one of the things that I had mentioned earlier in reference to the minimum wage and the minimum wage being tied to certain things. And one of the things the minimum wage is tied to is the performance of businesses. Because if you were to go and say, well, the minimum wage must be $2,000 per week, right? Now, Mr. Brand, you may feel, well, that should be good for a good standard of living for somebody. But what if Mr. Stanley's business, based on the economy and the performance of it, cannot handle that? So, it is all well and good if a person is campaigning and they say, well, we're going to make the minimum wage this. But when certain things are decided upon, they have to be taken into consideration with the other factors.
It becomes a vicious cycle, meaning that if the minimum wage increases,
everything else will increase.
Goods and services, in terms of price, must increase to have that correlating effect, because the business person is not going to go out of business simply because he has to increase the minimum wage. He's going to increase his prices. Now, I have something, those of us who work for corporate America understand certain things must be done. And when I actually filled out a form in the insurance and financial services end, you came and I have to fill out a retail credit form to ensure that the information that you have given to me is correct on that application, and thus this goes to a clearinghouse. That clearinghouse sends back the information to the company to make a determination as to whether or not this person's credit is good.
Well, let me ask you this quickly. We are due for a break, but the system, the financial system that we have in not only St. Kitts and Nevis, but also, you can say, the Caribbean, you think that we're right there yet to adopt this sort of system?
We must. We must. It is a mechanism that gives everybody some mechanism to see through, and it becomes a critical part of the decision-making process.
But when you listen to Mr. Hobson, and I get the feeling, as the caller said, and from my own understanding as well, a lot of people are now understanding it clearer. And that is what it is. But the way it has been put over and what you're getting from the feedback in the general public is quite something else. And sometimes you wonder if it is that people didn't know or whether it was really deliberate.
I would say this. I made mention about the child from adolescence to teenage years and ultimately employment. You can make the decisions in terms of what your earning power is and live within your means. If you know you have to do without electricity, and I give you
but the truth is, Mr. Stanley, in the real world, only a small percentage of people follow that practice. You agree with that?
In terms of discipline.
Okay, let me come right back. This is Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, Ted Hobson, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, the Honorable Spencer Brand. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616, 1700. We'll be back after these.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Island Roofing and Hardware Limited, located next to the Mondo Truck on Long Point Road, Nevis, specializes in the manufacture of 24-gauge pre-painted Galvalume roof sheets and the sale of tropical green hat lumber. They offer the traditional corrugated roof design for residential buildings along with the U-panel design for commercial buildings. Their roof sheets measure 42 inches in width and are manufactured on site and can be cut to whatever length you desire, thus eliminating the need for joining your roof sheets. Their aluminum-based roofing sheets, which are available at an affordable price of only $14 per foot, are of the highest quality. Their opening hours are Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. For more information, call 664-2441 or 664-2959. Island Roofing and Hardware Limited, meeting your complete roofing needs by providing quality products at affordable prices.
Tiles, and more tiles. Builders Paradise is the largest supplier of tiles. Tiles from as little as $3.95. Tile cement, 50-pound bag from as little as $37.44. And oh, don't forget to check out their Saturday sale for even better discounts. Visit them today at C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site, St. Kitts, or call them at 466-4938. Builders Paradise, where your island dreams begin.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with Dr. Patricia Bartlett, Ted Hobson, Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand.
As we went to the break, somebody mentioned that the bank's putting pressure on us, but I would say this, that the banking system is an entity, and they are investors who put their money into those entities that have created them. And those investors are looking for a return on their money. The central bank obviously is the master in the game and admonishes the local banks or branches, as the case might be, as to how they must navigate in order to keep the depositors' monies safe. And if for some reason they are operating into an area where red is going to come up, the central bank is going to be breathing down your neck. So it's not really the bank in the true sense of the word. The central bank is there to protect the depositors' money. And hence, the banks have to ensure that when they lend out that money, it's supposed to come back. Foreclosure is going to be, or has been, one of the big things. People are attempting to keep up with the Joneses without knowing how the Joneses are breathing. They see the Joneses with a new car, a new nice house, and they want the same thing without understanding how the Joneses got theirs. Consequently, they themselves overextended themselves and now find themselves facing debtor's prison. They cannot change that law. It has to stay on the books.
Mr. Hobson, in your profession through the years, have you seen a change in the way people borrow and pay back?
Oh yes, Webo. I mean, I used to boast to people that Nevis people don't borrow money. That has all changed, and again, it's because of the affluence of our society. Everybody wants everything the other person has. When I was growing up, and people of privilege have a nice car and a nice house, the ordinary person do not think that they have to get the same thing. They realize that these people work hard, or they, for some reason or the other, they were blessed with wealthy parents or whatever. They accepted that. But now everybody wants what everybody has. And that is the problem. Right now, Webo, and I was a director of a bank, and I'm not talking about the bank I was a director of, but I can tell you that virtually every bank in this island and in the Federation has a significant amount of non-performing loans. It isn't only the people at the lower level who are borrowing money who are in trouble. Affluent people with big houses and fancy cars, they owe substantially more money. And in some cases, they seem to be getting away with it because nobody is buying these houses. And so a lot of them, the bailiffs are not pushing them out. So a lot of them are still in the houses. You would look at the newspaper and you would find that such and such a house is up for sale, but the people are still in the house, and they've been in there for years because nobody's buying the house. And that is a real problem.
But there's a process.
Yeah.
There's a process. There's a legal process. So I'm not so sure that what you're saying.
What is the legal process? The foreclosure?
The foreclosure.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, even where you have that,
people still not buying.
The people are not buying, and for some reason or the other, the people are still in the houses because the banks have come to the realization if you close up the house, it's going to deteriorate. So they allow the houses to be occupied.
Mr. Hobson,
I'm telling you what I'm
the houses will fall on them and people living in them.
Mr. Hobson, do you think that encourages people then to continue along that path?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And you think then that if people figure that ultimately nothing can or will be done, they will be more encouraged to borrow and don't.
Of course, Webo. As I said, I happen to know of people who owe and so forth, and they're not paying. And if you see them, they're walking in the streets and they carry on and they're at the best function, and it's as if nothing is worrying them. Because
eventually the chickens come home to roost.
I suppose
I'm
so.
telling you. So what Ted is saying, even though people are still living in these houses, ultimately the lender has the handle.
Of course.
And the court will adjudicate, and they will be kicked out.
At some point.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, but what the
So
point is kicking them out.
Don't allow it to be understood that they think that they will get away with it ultimately.
Yeah, but I think the dilemma is, though, for the banks is that people are not coming forward to buy these houses.
That is the point.
They will be sold. Take it from me. They will be sold.
By
They're
who?
being sold.
Because as my wife always...
They're being sold, I'm telling you.
My wife always laments, there's so many houses out there, nice houses, that are up for sale, and yet people are building their own house.
Because it's cheaper.
People still are building houses all over the place, and all these houses are there for sale.
It may not be cheaper, it's just that you built your house to your own liking, and I want my house to my liking. And as a result...
Well, this is your argument.
As a result, I may not want that house. But I could tell you, somebody will see value in that house that you think that can be sold and will be sold, because the bank cannot keep on its portfolio, real estate.
But
they want the money.
But they can't get them sold.
They will be sold.
Yeah,
They're being sold.
Mr. Brand.
Yeah, well, one of the corrective mechanisms that I've been seeing as of late is that there is this attempt, so to speak, by many of the financial institutions to force down the amount of monies that people are being offered in terms of loans. And that is going to, in my mind, have one of the desired effect in terms of the reduction of the amount of money that people take from the bank. I think that from a construction point of view, it is going to reduce, so to speak, the size of dwelling that most persons would be able to afford to have.
Okay, Mr. Brand, just let me take this. I'll come back to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes. Sorry. But Mr. Hudson, you don't think that the bank is at fault? Are they allowing people to refinance and pay less than they contracted to pay by mortgage?
Sometimes.
Rather than taking nothing at all? If I believe that the bank has a responsibility, what I'm trying to suggest is this. If the mortgage cannot be paid according to the loan that was borrowed and according to the installment, can't the bank take less? Can't they help to refinance? Yeah. So, in my opinion, from my knowledge, in my opinion, I think the bank is the bank's fault that they have so many non-performing loans. I would take less and keep the people paying until their finances bring them up to where they were. But the banks are not doing that.
Well,
I may be wrong in my assessment because I have no insider knowledge.
Yeah, that's the point.
From where I am, I think that the bank has a responsibility in that as well.
They do take it.
Look,
they do refinance.
I'm glad you say that you have no insider knowledge about this thing. But the banks are and their directors are well aware of what you're talking about. And quite often, they work with these people to try and see whether they could get them to pay a lesser amount. I mean, the banks don't want to sell anybody's house. And so they work with these people and to see whether they could help them to become, a regular lender again, even if they have to take half of the amount and so forth. But they do work with their borrowers. I mean, when you borrow money from a bank, it's almost like family, and so the directors of the bank start treating you as if you're one of those, and they don't want to lose you, so they're trying to assist you. And that's what you have officers of the bank, all of them have people out there and negotiating with lenders, with borrowers all the time.
Mr. Brand?
Yeah, well, I was just saying that one of the corrective mechanisms that I've been, observing is the trust to reduce the amount of or the levels that persons are now borrowing from the bank. And I think that is now, in my mind, that is an attempt to try and give some added security, so to speak, to this financial institution by if someone goes to the bank asking for $500,000, the bank would try and find a way to probably ask them to take maybe $350 or, So those are things that they are trying to do.
But that's interesting, because if you need $500,000 to get the project or whatever it is done,
put the scissors on it.
I find that strange. I like you find that strange.
Of course, that don't to me make no sense.
Because generally,
the truth of the matter is that the borrower goes to the bank with a proposal in terms of the size or structure, configuration, as the case might be, of that particular house. And the bank's responsibility is to ensure that the information that is presented is correct, because I'll tell you, there are builders out there who are producing at 50% of their productive capacity, which increases the amount for labor cost. So by the time the house is completed, this massive debt is taken on by the borrower, the bank is holding it, but yet the money has been taken out by the labor people.
Yeah, but to Mr. Brand's
So what
point,
you have to do now is to ensure that when somebody comes and they want a 60 by 40 house, you have to make a comparison as to who else can build a 60 by 40 house and at what price.
Right, but Mr. Brand might come and say, I might say, I can build it for 200,000.
Contractually, you hold their feet to the fire.
But when you hold the contractor's feet to the fire, instead of myself becoming the person who is defaulting, Mr. Brand now is in trouble still. So it's just a matter of, it is not Webber who is in trouble, it is Mr. Brand. And when you look at it from a wholesome point of view, we still have a problem. Am I not correct?
Well, the problem, there's a problem. There is no question about it. There's a problem.
Yes.
But you have to know, identify the area of where the problem is.
So the point, to Mr. Brand's point, which we were addressing, I don't know whether or not carte blanche, trying to encourage to cut down the amount of money asked for without assessing if it is a real need, I don't know how that will work.
No, but I think that the concern, though, when they force down the money is within your ability to pay. Because some people think that, you know, you work for $6,000 and you have a $6,000 mortgage. You can't do that. There should be, and there used to be regulations as it relates to how much of a person's income could go towards that. So the bank is going to assess what it is you're bringing in. If you have 2 jobs, you know, total, what your expenditure is, you know, for those things that you must have, you know, and then they decide whether or not, whether it should be 40% or 60%. I don't know what the ratio is, but there used to be something like that used to guide the banks. You have some people who build in some massive houses and they really have no need for the massive houses because you live in a house with 3 bedrooms and sometimes you don't even go into the bedrooms, you know, and you have to pay for that, you know, and the problem has been that people are looking at the Joneses. Because in those times, Joneses mean that you had 2 people paying for the mortgage. But you have one person now looking over the fence at a mortgage, you know, with 2 people over the paying. And so one man's salary can't do it. And so sometimes what they do is they go to the bank and they say, well, me and my boyfriend going to build a house. And banks used to be so lenient on them. And then the boyfriend gone. You know, and then they come back and with hard luck story. So now is the principal person who is borrowing ought to be able to carry that loan. And I mean, like I said, I think that there's enough pressure in the banking institution and, you know, in that environment now to force us to start doing things differently. No longer could the boyfriend, because the boyfriend house probably not even going to appear on the mortgage, you know, and not, you know, you can't continue to do things like that. And we have done too much of that, you know, and I think now we're trying to, now that the horse is out of the barn, we're now trying to close the door. And it's a lot of trying to reel things back, you know, the way things ought to have been done. And I think we're learning the proper way of doing things now, and it's going to come at some financial pain for some of us. And some of us really, it's about how we look, you know. We want people to think that we're rich when we don't have any money. You know, you see these people driving around in a Benz and the tire them smooth. I mean, you can't afford a Benz, you know, get a Toyota, you know, live within your means, and it's a harsh story, you know, and people are going to have to just take it.
Toyota more expensive than Benz now.
Well, I'm just trying to make the point that, you know, we have to live within our means, and I don't know how else we can say it, you know.
One barometer I would give to people as a recommendation: where the money drops, it stops. When you run out of money, you let the project stop right there. But you build accordingly. You could build a 1-room shelter with a bath, and the strategy is there where you can always increase that dwelling little by little, based on construction techniques. So you don't have to go and build this massive structure, because I've seen some structures and I said to myself, I make a decent buck, but I can't afford a house like that. I'm being serious. I've seen some massive houses. And I kept asking the question. And some of them, they're going to be finished.
No, they can't finish them because they have to start paying mortgage at the same time they're moving in and have to buy furniture. That's why they have to go to courts.
Live within your means.
Come and collect things back. It's just ridiculous where we have been allowed to go and been encouraged to go. And some of the banks...
But here's a question, Dr. Bartlett. Being encouraged to go, by who? Who is doing this encouragement and who is doing the influencing? Because it's obvious that based on, what some of the points that Mr. Thompson made before, we were not always this way. So we've had to have been either encouraged, influenced, or something.
Yes, it has been a gradual process. I remember, the days when, I kind of realized when it started to happen. I myself built a house that I can't afford. I mean, no, Mr. Hobson, I'm paying for it, mind you, but I eat crackers but I make the sacrifice and I eat crackers and sardine, I'm just saying you can't have it both ways, I like a nice house and I, build a nice house, and so I try to make sure that I live within my means, so nobody could say that I borrow from them, because I don't do that. And I was brought up in the days that, you live within your means. You build your house and you add on a little thing. When I came back from school, I didn't go straight into, paying any rent. I built on a little thing at my mother's house, where I had my own private little area, and then after that, when I got enough money to build my own house, then I did. But people now want everything now. And they're being encouraged, and I said earlier, made reference to the fact that government has been, kind of guilty in doing some of that. But that is what we see on TV nowadays. I mean, we just borrow and spend, and we do that at the macro, level. We do that, we see our government borrow and spending. We see sometimes we having, our debt to GDP ratio is ridiculous. We had a time when we were like 100 and something percent, I mean, how do you operate like that? And we were just, borrowing and spending on things that we ought not to have been borrowing and spending on. And then we saw that even the federal government would have reneged on the payments, and people had to take haircuts and all them kind of things, It's an atmosphere that has been created, that people thought that they could just borrow people things and not give them back, And it has been pervasive throughout the entire society now. We have very little financial space to move now.
Well, should we tackle the problem at that same point, where we need to then maybe stop encouraging people and stop trying to influence people in trying to do that? Then should we attack it from that? Because once it continues.
Well, when I tell people how many banks we have in Nevis, they're surprised for this little island with about 14,000 people, and we have so many banks. And whether that is the real problem for us, is that all these banks are very liquid, and so therefore they are in competition with one another. So the kind of strict adherence to lending principles go by the way. And so a lot of people, especially the indigenous banks that we have here, they tend to be very loose in their lending. And that's one of the biggest problems we have. And I could tell you that although all of the banks have non-performing loans, the indigenous banks have significantly more than the others. And those are the local banks as well, and which has a measure of politics in it as well. So there you have it. So that is the real problem, that the banks are liquid and they need to invest the savings that are on the books, because it's no use to have $2 billion in the bank and can't get it loan, you can't invest it, and you still have to pay interest on those deposits. So there is an attitude where we will take a chance here.
Not now, though.
I think
but they have to tidy up. They have to be tidy up, and that is the problem.
The banks have.
And when you tidy up, they run to some politicians and say, look, we went to the bank and they wouldn't lend me the money, and that person in the bank is against them, and this and that, because they're on the other side and all that kind of thing. And there you have it.
Well, the portfolio of the banks, lending, mortgages, that is one portfolio, investment portfolio, and we have to clearly understand the latitude in which the banks operate, because some of them might be clearing house for monies coming from elsewhere, going from one bank to the other, as the case might be. You mentioned that there are a number of banks, quite a number of banks here, with relation to the population.
Mm-hmm.
And truly, we are overbanked, in a sense, based on what you're saying.
Because you not only have the bank, you have the credit unions who do the same thing. Finco, all of them.
But are they operating in other areas in terms of income for the banks?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, it's
Well,
very.
you've been on the inside.
Where do you now invest your money? It's certainly not in Nevis. You have to invest your money abroad. I'm talking about the banks now.
Quite
to a large extent.
Quite so.
And things are difficult outside there.
Not necessarily.
I mean, some of the banks lend a lot of money to Clico and what's the name, Rich American, and lost a lot of money too.
Well, you still have to do due diligence.
and then you don't get it back.
Yeah, you have to do due diligence. You have to know who you're lending to and why. But the objective is to remain solvent. And how many banks in Nevis went under? None. And as far as I know.
Yeah, but a lot of them are cutting back on the services. There's some banks that you can't go in and get a loan for a house right now.
Well,
you know?
I'm just saying they have to.
They're cutting back. It's costing them more.
Anyway, I think we have gone off it. We are still keeping on the burner, Webber.
This is Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand, Ted Hobson, Dr. Patricia Bartlett. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616 and 1700. We'll be back right after these.
Vibrates. The whole Caribbean must shake.
860 AM, the Powerhouse.
Looking for a place you can go to and relax and enjoy a healthy meal? Check out Island Life Vegetarian Food and Juice Bar located at Pinny's Industrial Site below the supply office. They are open Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. They offer you healthy, delicious, nutritious food on a menu that boasts Ital food, sandwiches, burgers, roti, puddings, and much more. They have a wide variety of freshly squeezed fruit and vegetable juices and smoothies that includes beet, carrot, pumpkin, tamarind, star apple, and sarsaparilla, and much more. Contact them today at 660-5318 or 668-3107.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results. Maybe we'll go on to the Independence 35. But before that, Mr. Hobson, I gotta let you know that you were correct, because I think when you were here last, and Naya was making the point about the debtors jail, and he was referring to a particular case, and then he said that he was going to bring the evidence and challenge it. But he brought it last week, and I just got to tell you, based on what he brought, because I read it for myself, you were correct.
I knew.
Yeah.
I've been around the world a long time.
Yeah, experience means something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, if something don't add up,
yeah,
it just don't add up. Okay, so the 35th anniversary of independence for St. Kitts and Nevis.
Where was he convinced that it doesn't add up? Was not convinced?
He was, but what happens sometimes is that, well, what I did, Mr. Hobson, having read it, I just asked Naya and Edric to just have a discussion. Okay, now what I was saying was that in terms of the 35th anniversary of independence for St. Kitts and Nevis, I've been noticing something over the years with the independence celebration. And you wonder whether or not if that's the way it ought to be. Seemingly, only maybe half of the people at the time celebrate independence. And it is the half who is in power at the time and who supports the party that is in power. Well, some people may argue, well, it's too much politics, but then it's political independence, right? But you get the feeling that we celebrate the independence the same way we do the politics, divide and rule. Edric.
Well, it should not be, because independence.
But you agree it is?
Unfortunately, I have to.
Oh, okay.
It's the harsh reality. But independence means far more than political independence. It means patriotism. It means that a country that gives us birth, it contributes to life and propels us upward and onward. Maybe we might eventually wind up someplace else, and I'm going to beckon to all those people who have been born in St. Kitts and Nevis to be patriotic and to come back to celebrate our 35th year of independence.
It's tomorrow, isn't
it? you should have made it a bill 2 weeks ago.
Not next week.
But no, listen, I can guarantee you that between now and 12 o'clock, you'll have almost 500 flights, maybe 1,000 flights, maybe 1,500 flights taking off from London, Tokyo, Stockholm, New York.
Well, let me put
Washington,
this to you. Let me put this to you. You want them to come and celebrate independence. They must be very patriotic. They're from here, etc., etc. But then you want to now, at the same time, begin to exclude them out of certain things.
Well, no, not Edric Stanley, but we have gone through that here, and I have admonished those who want to exclude them.
But I just wanted to make the point that it comes in a wholesome way, and that can be part of the problem that we may be having, don't you think? Because for one reason you want people to, when you're campaigning and so on, curse everybody, get upset with them, don't speak to them, and then... So we got to look things in a wholesome way, don't you think?
Well, that's the way it should be, but we are a people and we have our own opinion, and we sometimes amplify those opinions. In that regard, you'd find people with their differences. But when it comes to independence, when we were colonially governed, empire, there was a big thing. Well, now that we have our own leaders, whom we have chosen ourselves, this is the time for us to truly embrace patriotism, love of country, participation, and hence tomorrow we want to see everybody at E.T. Willett Park to celebrate our independence, and at Warner Park. Devoid of politics. Let's get beyond that and let's bring about some degree of political maturity to celebrate our independence as a nation and as one people.
Why is it that in terms of the politics, the speech that you just made will only be made by those who are in office at the time?
Well, when they make those speeches, they don't make those speeches primarily for those who are governing. They make those speeches with the hope that they could bring everybody together.
No, what I'm saying is that when a person is encouraging people to participate and let's go and do all that, it is the person who wins. The person who lost doesn't say that.
He doesn't want to say that because he has in his head the political strategy to divide and conquer.
But that's
divide and rule.
But
what I'm saying is that we should at least reach to a certain level of maturity, political maturity, to the extent where we try to bring everybody together. One country, one people.
But that's the theory. Ted, how near are we to what Edric is saying?
We're pretty far away from what Edric is saying. That's what it ought to be, but it hasn't been like that for the last 35 years. I mean, I myself have never been really, until very recently, until the last 5 years, I myself have not really been very involved in the independence. Even when the CCM was in office between 92 and 2006, it was always the feeling that it's a St. Kitts thing. And so we go through the motion, but there was very little enthusiasm for independence over here. And I'm beginning to see a change over the last 4 years, because I think people are aware that the government we now have in office, the unity government, have made a significant effort to make sure that Nevis get a better share of the resources of the country. And so I think people are willing to give the whole experiment a chance. And I would expect that tomorrow we'll have a fairly good turnout at the park. At least I hope so. But there is a glimmer of hope, Webo, and I think if we continue on this path, because the question of secession now is beginning to recede in people's mind. So you're in for the penny, you may as well be in for the pound. You understand? And I think people are now understanding that we all have to embrace independence. We all have to be able to sing the national anthem, which years ago, I mean, until very recently, I wasn't even able to sing the song. I didn't know the words. But it's only within the last number of years that I have embraced the song. I think it's a wonderful song, a national anthem. And I think hopefully that we'll become more involved in our independence, more involved in our country, and more involved and more patriotic than we have been in the past, especially in divisions, because, as I say, it has always never been really part of our celebration on independence Day. We really don't bother too much with it. But I think I see a change, Webo.
Dr. Bartlett?
Webo, the question that you ask us to whether or not, and I'm just paraphrasing, whether or not is always one side, that is celebrating and not the other side. Is it really a reflection of our level of patriotism? I don't know. The thing is, for me, patriotism, you can't make people patriotic, not just because they were born here. And I remember a friend of mine would have said to me once, membership should have privileges. And I think the privileges may be not extended to all equally. So sometimes it's difficult, I think, for you to feel like a member of this thing. And until we get to the point where everyone feels like they're a contributing member, I don't know that we'll ever have a independence celebration that everybody would participate in at the same time. I'm wearing my national colors tonight, by the way. I didn't get to go to the jump up thing that they had the other night because I thought it was time to get a religious, program on the way, and I couldn't settle with the Steel Bus thing. But like I said, it pains me when I see just some of the people involved, and the other set of people just sometimes it seems on the wayside. Not that they're not necessarily. It's not just independence, the day itself. You try to reach out to people, because if you could not extend a hand, of encouragement and camaraderie for the other 365 days, 364 days, sorry, on the 365th day, it's difficult for people to kind of accept that. So I think we need to embrace everybody. We need to treat everyone fairly. And I think that, not that I have anything against the country about self, but you see something like the motto that the Rotarians use, I think they have some 4-way tests that they apply. Yeah. Something, is it fear? These basic questions that we need to answer along the way. And if we could only apply that every day, and for those who don't know what I'm talking about, is the Rotarians have this thing, they ask the question, is it fear? Is it true? Would it build goodwill and friendship? Something like that. And at the end of the day, would it be beneficial to all concerned? That is the kind of country that I would like to see us live in, you know, and I would like for us to have that test. It seems to me too often politicians just have this attitude, and the default question for them is it legal? You know, once it's not illegal, they would do it. I mean, not that they wouldn't do it illegal. Well, I mean, not body. But like I said, we need to get to the stage that we want to build goodwill for everyone and get everyone involved. And then is when you're going to have everybody coming out, you know, for the independence celebrations. And you wouldn't have to be asking people to come out. You wouldn't have to be giving them a snack when they come out. I mean, yes, you know, if you can afford it, but people come sometimes just because they go get the snack. But I'm hoping that we'll get to that point where we are so patriotic that we would really want to just participate, irrespective of what side we're on. And it shouldn't just be because we're, you know, we have the unity construct, you know, that Nevis people feel, you know, included in the celebrations. You know, we ought not to get back to that stage ever. And I'm hoping that going forward, the mechanism would be put in place that we have a continuation of this, you know, goodwill between St. Kitts and Nevis.
But the truth is, even with the unity construct, I don't know if it is so much Nevis people or the Nevis people who are part of the unity construct or this unity construct, because remember it had a unity construct before. It may not have been called that. Mr. Brand.
Well, I think that your assessment is accurate. I believe that we have seen the politics within St. Kitts and Nevis created some deep-rooted wounds over the years, and I believe that people would have taken a step back on occasions like these because of that deep-seated wounds that one reason or the other, rightly or wrongly, well, there is no rightly for it really, that people would have felt over the years. I believe, Webo, that the patriotism or the patriotic feel of our people, I asked the question, was it ever taught to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis? I think that we went to a period in the 60s and 70s, way before my time, when things...
Brand, let me just take this. I'll come back to you. Thank you for holding. Could you go ahead?
Good evening, Robert. Good evening to your fellow panelists, and good evening to the rest of the leaders. Well, I saw on social media today a post that suggests that for this independence, 35th independence celebration, that is touted to be a big one. All of the folks that were honored, they were all from St. Kitts and none from Nevis. Your thoughts on that, please? Well, you as in you and the other panelists.
All the folks who were honored were from St. Kitts. I don't know if that's correct.
Okay.
I don't think.
I don't know what you call Calvin Foy and Division Architecture, but he was one of the list.
Yeah, I don't think that's correct, though.
What did Mr. Hobson say?
I said I don't know how you would regard former Chief of Police Calvin Foy, but he I remember is on the list. I don't know. He's a Kittitian, I suppose, but he has spent a good deal of his life here. I regard him as a division.
Yeah, as far as I know, he's from Anguilla, I thought. But
Anguilla is from St. Kitts.
One out of 16 is a meager proportion.
Well,
I just want your thoughts on it. I'll listen off you.
Yeah, okay. Well, to get the thoughts on something, first you have to get the premise correct.
Yeah, but
right?
Well, I think these matters are not people who recommend people. They have a what do you call it?
A committee. Yes.
Not a committee. What's the name? Where you have to recommend people to be on, to get honors and so forth. And I suppose if nobody is recommending, if everybody is recommending, the same thing we are saying, there is more interest in this kind of independence and awards and things in St. Kitts than it is in Nevis. If nobody is recommending anybody from Nevis, well, Oh, you mean the Prime Minister must just put together some people?
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. Again, you mentioned that thoughts of secession seem to be receding, but isn't this so because of the personalities and the parties in power? And that we've given our citizens a false sense of security, that everything is now hunky-dory, when in fact underlying problems still persist. And if we don't deal with them, we're just setting up future generations for conflict. Right? Don't you think after 35 years, we should be doing something about our Constitution, for even if it's just for review and renewal? But certainly, there are changes, I think, that need to be made specifically. I think a government for St. Kitts, a clause similar to 113 for St. Kitts, in order for us to have parity here, and some kind of federal structure that does not disadvantage divisions, and finally forming up how we share resources, because I think that's the crux of the problems that we have. Thanks.
Okay, thank
you.
Well,
I'll just make a comment.
I'll come to you, Edric. What I'll say to that is that that topic tells me an election is somewhere close to hand. Edric, go ahead. Somebody reminded me the other day of that question that I put to Dr. Douglas way back when. It's constitutional. And said, Dr. Douglas, why do I get the feeling that 5 years from now, when we'll be asking the same question, and that's maybe 20 years hence? Edric, go ahead.
Yes, the caller made a very interesting point with reference to a clause 113 for St. Kitts. But I would admonish him by saying what we need to do is to do a constitutional reform and remove clause 113 for Nevis.
No way.
Well, you have your opinion, Ted, and it is, I sometimes say, not everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But I'm saying to you that we need unity for many reasons.
You think
and therefore, the suggestion coming from the person, of course, it brings about a level playing field. But to take away rancor and take away this idea that Nevis at some point in the future, as he suggested, might still want to go, I'm saying remove the clause.
You think we're due for a light moment now?
No, we're not due for a light moment.
Okay, well, still,
when I came back here,
still, I want to ask, what about that Edric Stanley Constitution that can't? You remember that?
Yes, when I came back and read the Constitution, I said that clause is constitutionally unconstitutional because St. Kitts didn't have the same opportunity or constitutional way of going if St. Kitts wants to.
Well, let me ask you
if
this.
If the clause remains for Nevis,
it's unconstitutionally, right? It's unconstitutional.
It's constitutionally unconstitutional.
Well, let me ask you this. Well, let me ask you this. Based on that logic, is it fair to deduce that anything that is in the Constitution that is available to one and is not available to the other fits under that?
Sure, quite so.
Okay.
Quite so. And therefore, I am saying to those, and maybe the Honorable Spencer Brand can help me, the bridge would bring some unity to the process.
And you said that we're not in a light moment.
We're not in a light moment, Webo. We're not in a light moment. I'm saying
I don't think you want to help me with that. You need help me with that.
Well, no, you should amplify it now. No, we got the opportunity because.
But you say you have the design. Bring the design.
The design is already there. Yes, but you're now in government.
Oh, dear.
And of course, the Honorable Prime Minister has a copy of the design already.
What design? Your bridge?
A computer model. Let me look at a computer model.
Of your bridge?
Of the bridge that I'm proposing. A computer model.
Of your bridge?
Webo, it's the People's Bridge.
Yeah, The one that you put forward?
Yes.
The Prime Minister has a copy of it?
Has a copy of the computer model.
And he knows?
He does know.
Oh, okay.
He does.
He has a copy of it,
Yes.
and he knows that he have a copy.
He does know.
Okay.
And not only
the
PM.
I got you.
And I'm saying to you.
Well, let me ask you this: why did you give the Prime Minister a copy? And did he ask you?
No.
But I asked you, and you didn't give me.
Well,
why?
You sometimes have to approach the task.
So I don't have that kind of stature.
Not yet.
That's
Not
why.
yet.
So that's why.
Not
That's why I asked you, and you did not give me.
You see, the people who are in that circle of the decision-making process, as I just reached and touched the Honorable Spencer Brand.
Give me a copy of it, man.
He is in a seat where he can influence.
He can get a copy.
Quite so.
Oh, well, let me ask you this, so that I might feel that I'm in good enough company. Does Ted have a copy?
No.
Is he to that level yet?
No.
Okay, well, I'm in good company.
No. But what I'm saying to you is that we have to begin to chip away at the rancorous systems, because we need a unified country, a country with economic scale.
And you said the Prime Minister has a copy of this thing.
Yes,
You sent it, or you gave him?
I personally delivered it into his hands.
Okay.
Right?
Just checking.
But I am saying to you that it's a simple
And
matter.
when you personally gave, and when you gave him, you told him what it was?
I didn't have the Prime Minister.
No,
man.
Yeah, but work with me, Edric. When you gave the Prime Minister, did you tell him what it was?
Well, yes, I'm certain. Yes,
when you,
yes, 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 yes,
oh boy!
And you know,
Ted, in the days when you were a magistrate, how would you have treated an encounter like this? Would you have much confidence in Mr. Stanley?
He stammered down.
There are times you have
the
to.
The impression I got was that he handed him the thing.
Go back into your archives,
okay.
memory, to ensure that you, in fact, stated what it was. And it was not that it was given in a vacuum.
Okay, let me take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening again, Weber. This one is for Mr. Stanley, Mr. Brand, and Sister Pat Bartlett. I didn't get an answer from them. Did we drop the ball somewhere? Or is there nobody in Nevis worthy of honoring? How about the business people who we lean on for support, financial support, all year round? Or were we too busy caught up with the Steel Pulse tribute? I like your opinion, Mr. Stanley. You always have a word.
Okay, let me just get this final break, and I'll come back, Mr. Stanley.
Island Roofing and Hardware Limited, located next to the Mondo Truck on Long Point Road, Nevis, specializes in the manufacture of 24-gauge pre-painted Galvalume roof sheets and the sale of tropical green hat lumber. They offer the traditional corrugated roof design for residential buildings along with the U-panel design for commercial buildings. Their roof sheets measure 42 inches in width and are manufactured on site and can be cut to whatever length you desire, thus eliminating the need for joining your roof sheets. Their aluminum base roofing sheets, which are available at an affordable price of only $14 per foot, are of the highest quality. Their opening hours are Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. For more information, call 664-2441 or 664-2959. Island Roofing and Hardware Limited, meeting your complete roofing needs by providing quality products at affordable prices.
Back with our remaining minutes. The last word from Edric W. Stanley. Edric.
Well, the caller mentioned that no one was from Nevis, and then I heard Ted mention that Commissioner retired Calvin Foy is a Nevisian. I mean, I also heard he was born in Anguilla, but for all practical purposes, Calvin Foy, Commissioner retired, is a Nivision, and thus he was among them. But there's a process through which this is done, and if for some reason the process did not include any other Nivision, then the Prime Minister can, out of thin air, bring somebody to the fore to honor them, or whatever the ceremony was. We know that was that those honorees, and therefore it can be done in a vacuum. The caller now, recognizing that, next time around, he should take the initiative and encourage other people to help him and to recommend other Nivisions to be part of that process.
And tomorrow, I'm sure there'll be a number of awards given to deserving people in Nevis.
In Nevis tomorrow, they would be.
Yeah, I'm sure that.
I mean, I've gone to all the celebrations because I just believe in my country. I love my country. And as a result, I will be there tomorrow, regardless to which party is in.
And whenever
I am there.
And whenever you hear me keep asking the same question over and over, there's a reason why. So you gave the Prime Minister.
I gave the Prime, yes, Webber.
And he knows.
He knows. And I gave to other people too.
No,
but those are the people who got the clout to make things happen.
You gave the Prime Minister.
Yes.
And he knows.
He knows.
This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. This is Talk That Get Results. Thank you all for joining us. You all have a wonderful evening.